day, and thank you for joining us on today's podcast. For educational purposes and for tax compliance, today we will be covering a very nuanced yet very common topic, which is registering of a company in South Africa for both South African residents and non-residents with the Companies and Intellectual Properties Commission, as well as the South African Reserve Bank applications required and the South African Revenue Service tax registrations. Joining me is Tasneem Pandor, the subject matter expert and company secretary for Tax Consulting South Africa. Welcome, Tasneem.
Thank you for having me, Jashwin.
So, Tasneem, I think where we probably want to start is to just explain the role of the CIPC and how it interlinks with SARS in terms of your registration requirements.
Yes, not a problem. So CIPC, the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, is basically South Africa's government agency that, you register your companies with and ensures in compliance with the Companies Act, etc.
All right, and where does it fit in with SARS? Because, especially with filing season for individuals around the corner, a key consideration on lots of South Africans' minds are SARS, and SARS. So when you register a company, does it automatically register you for tax, or is that now a separate function that needs to be done?
Yeah, so when you do register a company in South Africa, it does automatically register you for income tax, and that is how they are related. So your company automatically gets registered for income tax, and that then relates to SARS.
And what about the other tax types?
Other tax types are not related to CIPC. That is solely SARS function. They have nothing to do with the CIPC. CIPC just registers your income tax number, and that is what is shown on your company documents. So your disclosures, your memorandum of incorporation. Yeah.
So, Tasneem, regarding the CIPC, are there different rules applicable for South African resident shareholders and for non-resident shareholders?
Yes, of course. So for local shareholders, you don't need to have their share certificates endorsed by the South African Reserve Bank, right? For the non-South African resident shareholders, you do have to have your shareholding endorsed by the South African Reserve Bank. So that is an additional requirement if you have foreign shareholding that you need to follow, you need to comply with.
All right, and is that a bit of a lengthy process?
It definitely is. It can take between 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, that is extensive.
Yeah.
And what about foreign directors? Are there additional compliance or verification requirements for them?
Yes, so CIPC has actually implemented the Foreigner Verification Assurance process. So basically what that does is that they require non-South African residents to actually submit a certified or notarized copy of their passports to the CIPC with all their information and the details, recorded. And then CIPC will decide whether or not the information submitted is actually acceptable. Upon acceptance, they let the foreign directors know, and then they can go ahead and proceed with the company registration.
Now, is this something new, or is this something that has been a function of the CIPC for an extended period of time?
So actually CIPC has been undergoing a lot of updates, especially to their systems. So the whole idea behind the updates was basically to help individuals registering companies make their lives a little bit easier. Unfortunately, that hasn't gone according to plan. There has been a few hiccups in the last few months. So foreigner assurance verification process, that is one of the new updates to the system, just to ensure compliance and, ensure that all information is correctly, correctly inputted into the system.
Okay, so that seems to align quite well, and the rationale is there. Similarly, how your rationale is there when the non-resident shareholder requires an exchange control endorsement,
yes,
and rationalizes that dividends may need to leave the country and the Reserve Bank needs to be aware of it. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, speaking on new developments with the CIPC, what is this concept of beneficial ownership and how does it work?
Beneficial ownership. So the submission of beneficial ownership information to the CIPC is basically you're letting the CIPC know who ultimately owns or controls the company, whether it's directly or indirectly. So in some cases, it can be a bit easy. If you have, let's say, one individual shareholder that is a South African resident, perfectly fine, whether or not they are a South African resident. If you have one individual that is the shareholder, the process is easier. It becomes a bit more complex when you have these complex business structures, and you actually have to calculate the percentage ownership that these individuals have. So it can become a very lengthy process. Also, you have to verify these individuals' information, especially if they are foreign shareholders.
Okay, so I think probably the last thing that we need to cover at this session, and this may very well be a series of podcasts depending on different elements and what is most topical in the market, but with regards to registering a company in South Africa, from your lengthy experience in this field, what are some pitfalls that you've seen? Obviously, aside from the CIPC's continuous site maintenance.
Yes. Apart from the maintenance of the site, they can, you can register the company online, especially if it is a PTY limited.
Okay.
Right. So that is fairly simple. It can take, it can either take 1 day or it can take 3 weeks, depending on the CIPC. It all depends on them. So the PTY limited is a fairly simple company to register. It becomes a bit more difficult when you have to register an external company, because those are manual submissions, and we know from CIPC's past that they take fairly longer with the manual submissions, especially when it comes to foreign directors and things like that. So with the external companies and with any manual submission to CIPC, you are looking at, it can take anywhere between five working days to about a month, depending on them.
Okay, now Tasneem, I know you mentioned the CIPC systems and the delays, etc. And, for years we've seen the same thing with SARS.
Yes.
So do you think that practically the CIPC would go in a similar direction as the Revenue Authority and start making use of AI to actually enhance and streamline their processes?
Well, we've seen how it's worked in SARS' favor in some instances, and it's become a very complex thing in other instances. They could possibly. I don't foresee it in the near future. I don't see that, because they have already experienced so many problems. They've encountered so many problems with their new system updates, and they haven't completely and utterly fixed all of those. So once they have fixed those errors, once they've fixed those updates, maybe they can look at AI enhancement. But I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future now.
All right. Well, thank you, Tasneem, and certainly something to look out for should there be any AI developments in the near future. It may very soon be a case that it's a bot that is verifying director details and shareholder details rather than an individual at the CIPC.